Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Yoli Show where I talk about everything marketing, past, present, tools and technology, and sometimes, like today, I nerd out on some basics. Today I'm going to take you through my favorite 10 or 12 slides, just visuals for you to use to explain to anybody, even your grandma, about B2B marketing. But do not be fooled by the simplicity of these slides because the conversations that these slides can draw out will sometimes separate the amateurs from the professionals. Let's get into it. All right, so guys, I'm going to take you through some really basic fundamentals for B2B marketing. And there'll be some insights that are relevant for B2C because quite often what is working in B2B marketing these days are actually insights that have been drawn from how B2C focused companies go to market. But they are really, really the basics. However, what I have found is that when it comes to diagnosing what is wrong with a business, or if a business is stagnating, or if growth has not been at the velocity that really a company should be having, it really helps to just go back to the fundamentals. And so for some of you senior marketers and business people, this will be like, duh, super obvious. But for some of you, it actually they might be good reminders as you are thinking about new plans for the coming year and looking for ways that you might diagnose and optimize your business. It helps to just have a little reminder. Now, what you'll go through is what I call a mashup. These are a mashup of visuals that I've captured over the years from one of my favorite sources of insights. It is not marketing gurus. It is not, other founders. It is not the analysts. But my favorite source sometimes of business and marketing insights are VCs. That's right, venture capitalists, because they have the right incentives to figure out what works, and they are inside multiple businesses, and they are seeing what is affecting companies' go-to-market strategies and what is actually effective and what is changing even from things that were effective 5 years ago that are no longer effective. And so I will shout out all the VCs that I captured these particular slides from. So please enjoy the mashup and engage in the conversation. If you have some additional insights, feel free to comment or even DM me if there's something you'd love to talk about. But I talk to startups a lot about these things, and I also enjoy having conversations with existing businesses that might be stagnant and might need to go to the basics. So let's get into it. So the first slide I'm going to take you guys through is this beautiful slide that I should give credit to um, David Scott at Matrix Partners for. Now, I love the simplicity of this slide because it really shows the difference between a balanced business model and a business model that is not in balance. And the two KPIs, the two factors that you're looking at that impact how well your business model is balanced is the CAC, the cost to acquire a customer, versus LTV, lifetime value, how much money you can expect to get from that customer. Now, when you think about LTV, the questions you want to be asking yourself is, if you have a low LTV, why are people churning? That means you probably have a high churn rate. They're canceling their subscription, or they're canceling their service with you, or they're not upgrading from maybe the free product into the paid product. And so when you think about LTV, you want to ask yourself, Are you measuring customer satisfaction? Do you have a mechanism to measure CSAT? Are you looking at NPS, Net Promoter Score? That might be a mechanism that you use to track and improve and optimize your CSAT, which will impact your LTV. The other factor you want to look at is, do you have an expansion strategy? Do you have built into your marketing and sales efforts this notion of driving more adoption, driving more upgrades, driving more upsell into higher value products or services in your business? And so that's LTV. So this is a very basic way of looking at CAC versus LTV. Generally, you want your CAC to be 3 times lower or more than your LTV. And you want to be able to recover your CAC in less than 12 months. And so you're always looking at, what is it costing me to acquire a customer? And how can I reduce that cost? And we'll talk a lot more about that in a minute. And how can I increase the LTV, the lifetime value from an existing customer, either by improving the product and having an expansion strategy. So improve the product so that they'll stay on the subscription longer, or have an expansion strategy so that they buy more premium services, or they upgrade, or they expand into other products that you have that are part of your business. So that's 101 on CAC versus LTV. But here's where you really separate the amateurs from the professionals. And I say amateurs affectionately because, hey, we all are in different stages of our learning and have had different experiences that have taught us different lessons. Now, here's what more sophisticated and more experienced marketers and salespeople and business people know, is that you cannot conflate CAC with CPA. Sometimes what happens in less mature organizations is that they're actually conflating these two. CAC, the cost to acquire a customer, versus the cost per acquisition. Now, they are very different metrics, and I love these visuals that I got. Credit to Andrew Chen from Andreessen Horowitz, and where he gives you great visuals to explain very simply and directly the difference between CAC and CPA. So if you look over on the left-hand side here and look at Dropbox, so they would look, in their example, CAC would likely refer to the cost to acquire a paying customer. So a paying customer in their model would be somebody who's paying for the pro plan or the team plan, etc. And you'd use CAC as a metric to measure the cost to acquire that paying customer. Because they have a freemium model, you would use CPA, cost per acquisition, to refer to and measure the cost per registration for a free user, or maybe it's the cost per activation for that free user, or any other cost that's associated with their free users. Okay, but in their business model, it would not make sense for them to be conflating CAC and CPA because they measure two very different things for their business model. So the question you need to be asking yourself is, how do you define a customer? At what point are they a customer? Is it when they are a paying customer? And you then, at that point, you'd be using CAC. If they're not a paying customer, does it make sense in your business model to use CPA as a measure? So in the case of HubSpot here, that is a B2B SaaS product, CAC for them would be CAC, the cost to acquire a paying user, for they have a tiered model. So for the basic plan, there'd be a specific CAC for Pro and for Enterprise. But CPA might refer to, because they're B2B SaaS, they have a sales pipeline. They probably have an inside sales team and a marketing team that is focusing on driving anonymous users to become known leads and marketing qualified leads if they're using marketing automation. So they would have CPA referring to cost per lead, or cost per sales qualified lead, or cost per trial if they have a free trial on their website, which a lot of B2B SaaS businesses do. And so CPA and CAC would be two completely different numbers. If you look in the case of Facebook, where they have a free product, but essentially for them, a paying customer is an advertiser. So CAC would refer to the cost to acquire an advertiser, but they might use CPA for the cost to acquire a paying new registrant, right? Or activating a new user. They would use CPA in that case. So I love these visuals, very simple, easy for you to explain to anybody, that they don't have to be in marketing in order for them to understand this. So credit to Andrew Chen from Andreessen Horowitz. The other mistake he says people make, so the first one is conflating CAC with CPA. The other one he talks about is not taking into consideration the sales cycle length. This one is huge, but it is a bit of a pain to build into your calculus, but you will feel the pain of making bad decisions if you do not build this into your calculus. So in B2B businesses, for example, sometimes the sales cycle can be a month or 2 or even 9 months. And if you are judging your marketing by how much it's costing to acquire that customer in that month, you'll have the wrong calculus and you'll make wrong decisions. If you are not baking in the length, the sales cycle length into your calculation, and he's got some really good simple visuals. So let me kind of navigate you through this. So over on the left hand side, he shows you how, Dropbox and HubSpot, right? From the initial sign up for Dropbox to the upgrade to Pro or Team, that might be a year. It might be never. It might be 2 years, depending on who this is, right? If it's a musician that's using this to store their song files, they might upgrade, maybe they'll upgrade, in a year. If it's a graphics designer or an agency business that's using Dropbox, they might upgrade in 3 months, or in a month. For example, with HubSpot, they might have a three month, sales cycle. It doesn't matter. But the point is, if your math to calculate CAC is just the simple math, which you see in the middle here, of total marketing expenses plus total sales expenses divided by new customers acquired, which typically happens in the month, your math will look like this table with the red cells highlighted. Let's say your target CAC was $125. You would say that the marketing activities we did were ineffective because the CAC is too high, and you might optimize yourself out of those marketing tactics. If you didn't have the calculus to include and take into consideration the sales cycle length, which is what you see in the bottom when you include the calculus that says, hey, it takes us 2 months to convert this lead to a closed sale, or from somebody to go from the freemium to the paid product. And so when you actually evaluate the marketing tactics that you used to drive that customer with the new calculus, you see that the CAC was actually $111, which is way below the target you had of $125. You see that? So you might be making some incorrect decisions, and looking at your data incorrectly if you're not taking into consideration the sales cycle. So over on the right hand side is really what your formula should look like. So not only should it incorporate the total marketing and sales expenses, but it should incorporate the calculus to include the sales cycle length. And you'll see that the numbers and marketing would be looked at quite differently if the sales cycle is included. And so your math, this might be something that you might want to go back to. If it's not something that you've been doing, you might want to sort of optimize and have both views so that you can make good decisions about your marketing. So Andrew also has, what I call CAC Hardcore, and this is being a little bit more hardline about what is included in your sales and marketing expenses. Some companies I'll see do not include the overhead or the cost of tools, and it kind of gives this false sense of security about your marketing. I think at the very least you should be looking at both views. You should be looking at fully loaded CAC as well as sort of your CAC, less overhead, less people, etc. But if you want to have a hardcore view of what it's really costing you to do business, then you can have a fully loaded CAC, which is marketing plus sales. He also does go to point out that for some businesses, you really also need to be thinking about including the cost of developing the product. Especially if you're heavy service oriented, or in the case of Shopify, of Spotify here, where the product is free, but there is a cost to develop that free product and support the free product, they should be looking at that in their CAC. And then the last example he gives here is Dollar Shave Club, where they have a physical free product. In that case, you definitely want to build that into your CAC calculus. So not only the cost to acquire the free trial user, but the cost to produce that free trial, to ship it, and to support the free trial. So I found those visuals very simple, very easy to understand, and super helpful, and hopefully can initiate an interesting conversation in your business. So this next slide is sort of the next conversation that people tend to have in marketing, which is brand versus demand generation, direct response versus brand awareness. When do we do it? Should we do it? Should we do brand? So there is no right or wrong answer. The answer is it depends. And some of the things that people have considered over time is like what you see in this visual, is it depends on the life stage of your company. So typically in B2B SaaS, which is what I'm focused on, in the early stages, companies are just trying to find product market fit. And it makes sense to emphasize demand gen, direct response marketing, driving leads, supporting pipeline, specifically because you're trying to get to a repeatable economic model. You're trying to get to a place where you understand what your CPA is, what your CAC is, and what your LTV is, right? And once you've got product market fit, then you want to stabilize CPA, or actually be bringing that down. You want to be stabilizing your CAC or bringing that down, and you want to be increasing your LTV. Now, as usual, there are always exceptions. So if you are in a space where you are well funded and you're actually trying to create a new category, or your product necessitates a change in behavior, then you should be spending more on brand, right? You should be spending more on brand awareness, because there are going to always be me too's that are going to be faster and as well funded, who, if you haven't owned or become the de facto for the category, then you're just leaving an opening for them. Um, one of the, there's a whole sort of thought leadership, and lots of conversations on category creation. I'd encourage you to kind of delve deeper into those conversations. But with respect to brand and with respect to the product or sector in, you're always in danger of making your product a commodity if you have not secured the category and established your brand. And in a commodity business, customers just flitter from one product to the next. And so brand is really about building an enduring company that other businesses grow with, and customers are loyal to, and there's an intrinsic sort of value imputed on your products and services. So anyway, I like this visual because if you're trying to make a call, and there's a whole bunch of other factors that go into this, like how much money do you have to spend, expertise of the people, in your marketing teams, where you are in the life stage. But I think it makes the point that, hey, by year 10, you should be focused on really, you're going global, establishing the brand. The way I think about branding, now, there's so much literature on branding and the power of brand and why brand is important. But the way I simplify it, and the way I think about it is what is the one thing that makes the prospect, the buyer, pick up the phone, answer the email, attend the event, click on the ad, refer? It's typically branding. It's typically branding. You want to make it easier for your sales team, you should be out there with some brand awareness. Now, you got to be doing both, but you prioritize and make your decisions based on how much budget you've got, etc., and a whole bunch of other factors. But that is one thing that I always think about, is what makes it easier for the sales guys to get their outreach engaged with. And it's brand. But if you're a startup, you're trying to make that call, are you trying to create a new category, or are you just going into a space that exists, and you're just trying, maybe you found an area that a niche you can fit in. Just focus on demand gen, get product market fit, drive that pipeline, establish your CPAs, stabilize your CAC, and then focus on branding. But if you are in a space where you're highly competitive, you got to establish a brand if you want to be the de facto one or two. Anyway, so that one, I really do love that visual. Okay, next slide. So this one goes back to one of David Scott's slides. And this is the conversation around sales complexity. And I like this visual because it just forces everybody in the room to really just kind of understand a few things. It costs more to drive customer acquisition the more humans are involved in the sales cycle. Okay? So the more humans are involved in the sales cycle, the higher your CAC is going to be. Okay? And I've worked with businesses, I've had to market businesses on every end of this spectrum So from the freemium product, a product like Office 365 that where you might have had just a free trial, or on the other end of the spectrum where you go to sales, you go to market with a sales engineer, solution architect, field sales, you can expect your CAC to be higher. And your CPA will also be higher. I love this visual because it also helps you start to have the conversation, perhaps with the engineering team, if you're on the marketing team, about, hey, what can we do to build some touchless conversion into our model? You know, is there a way we can create a demo environment that's public, or we can get people to test drive the product, or they can have even a free version, a light version, and that gives them some features, etc., etc. But seeing this in the context of CAC and in the context of how much it's going to cost you to, how complex the sales cycle is, and how much it's going to cost you typically to drive a customer, is very helpful, I find. Okay. Now this one is my favorite visual, because essentially you can build a whole marketing plan off of this visual, and it can help you diagnose what you do or don't have, and what you should and or shouldn't, should stop doing, or what you should consider optimizing, or what you should consider adding into your go-to-market strategy. So the way to read this, and this is tied to the very first slide I showed you, where it showed you a out of balance model with a balanced model. These are the things that help you balance your business model. Over on the left-hand side, the things that help you lower your cost to acquire a customer: viral effects, inbound marketing, having a free product, open source APIs, plugging into those developer communities, free trial, touchless conversion, anything where there's fewer human beings involved will cost less to drive the customer, having an inside sales team versus a full-fledged field sales team in between, channel strategy. Do you have strategic partnerships where you can piggyback off of other people's customer base or membership or marketing channels? I'm a huge fan of strategic partnerships. Those things can bring your CAC down. The things that can bring your lifetime value up, we've talked a little bit about. Obviously your recurring revenue can be improved by an improved experience, reducing churn, having scalable pricing, as you enable upgrade or premium services, cross-sell and upsell into other products and services, product line expansion, and then lead gen for third parties. If you end up having built this experience that has a ton of eyeballs, or even if you have niche specific customers that are ancillary target customers for an ancillary product, that are the same target customers for another business's ancillary products, that might be something you might consider building in as a new revenue model for yourself. Anyway, lots to talk about in this slide. You can have a lot of discussion with your team and the rest of the business. One of my favorite slides. Thank you, David Skock from Matrix Partners. All right, this one is from Martin Casado. This is from a talk that he gave on YouTube that is very, very nerdy, very interesting. I'm going to show you a couple of snips from his presentation. Basically, the spirit of his talk was really that, hey, The way B2B companies go to market is changing. Looks very much like B2C companies. There's some things you need to understand and watch out for. And I found these visuals super helpful. The way he explains the new model that a lot of B2B businesses are going through, that is very unlike the way traditional B2B businesses go to market, is, they'll start with focus on a simple use case, one pain point that they're trying to solve. They get bottom up adoption because they're doing things like inbound marketing, all that stuff that I said drives the lower CAC. So they have a touchless conversion free product, mostly free product, like Slack, Atlassian, those companies use this model. Bottom up adoption, they get millions of users and it becomes a well-known brand, and then they overlay sales. Then they think about developing a field sales organization. Then they think about developing the complexity into the product. Huge and very effective strategy, particularly when the growth levers are built into the product. So they've got that viral sort of network effects happening in the product. A ton of businesses that have used this model, and it's very hard to defend against. What I like in his presentation was that he, even though we know it's happening, it is not easy to do. So they call this growth plus sales. It's a growth plus sales motion. And he did go through a couple of things that you should look out for as you start to look at your numbers. And these are some questions you can ask. Just sort of summarizing. The first chart, top left-hand side, you can have a chart that's like growth with no sales. So you just took a strategy where you were like, we're going to drive bottoms up growth. We got the free product. Well, at some point you're going to have to ask yourself, do we need to monetize? How are we going to make money, right? We've heard about these companies, right? Drove a ton of growth, no sales. At some point they have to bring in the grown-ups, and it's like, okay, let's make some money. Then there's the sales with no growth. There's some companies that start out with a sales force, right? But they don't have a growth mechanism to drive pipeline. That ends up making it super hard for the sales team, right? There's no street cred. Nobody knows the brand. It is a hard grind. Then there's some companies, top right-hand side, where, they're trying to do both. They're like, okay, we gotta have a growth, bottoms up growth, but we also gotta have sales out there as well. And sometimes what happens with companies is that the people that come in through the free product are not the kind of people that actually would pay for the product. And so marketing has to optimize the profiles and the targeting of the folks that come in through the growth product, so they are actually those people that would upgrade, that would upsell into the premium product or into expansion products. Then he also talked about when growth cannibalizes sales. And that's when you've built too much into your free product. You're giving away too much. Your free product, your freemium product actually kind of just solves enough of the pain point that folks just won't upgrade into premium. And so then you've essentially invested too much and given too much away. And so that's something to look for. And then bottom middle chart, he talks about when sales gets ahead of growth. And this is really when your growth engine is not working hard enough to drive enough into the sales can't handle they don't have the capacity to handle the pipeline growth that's being driven through the bottoms up model. But essentially you're limited by your growth engine. And a lot of businesses run into that problem. And it's really just about balancing that out. And if you get into if you have an economic model that understands that and has taken that into consideration in terms of projections of when we're going to hire, etc., how fast we can expect pipeline to come in and when should we be sort of fully hired, la la la. All of that is taken into consideration. And then the last bottom right hand side is when sales ruins growth purity. I like how he put this. He was basically just saying that sometimes the growth of the freemium product is brought on just by popularity and really just like a huge fan base that thought the product was cool. But then as soon as you make the product more complex and then bring in a sales force, it loses its cool factor and kind of stalls out growth in the business. So I thought those were good visuals to just kind of, as you start to diagnose and look for areas in your business where you might, this is a good sort of conversation starter. Love these visuals. Okay, this next visual is just around the conversation around inbound versus outbound marketing. By now, every marketer knows they've got to be doing some inbound marketing. But I do worry sometimes that people think that inbound marketing is going to, be the end all, like doing SEO is going to be the end all and just see a huge increase in traffic. It's important to understand the characteristics of each type of marketing and when to use them and when should really be combined. And really, this slide, I think, calls out the value of integrated marketing. Because what we really need to do is be doing it all, essentially. But it does help you prioritize and think about how you should be resourcing your team, etc. So inbound marketing is all the marketing you do to create the pull effect to attract leads. So you're blogging, having a solid blog, having your all of your content SEO enabled, so you show up in search, and so you're driving traffic. Doing things like podcasts, making sure you have multiple formats for all of your content, having solid life cycle marketing. All of that is inbound marketing. Now, the characteristics of it is that it's slow to show results, right? It's harder to measure, tends to be impersonal. The positives of it is that it's cost effective and it's unintrusive, which is why it works, because it ends up being quite contextual and it's broad. And what I like about inbound marketing is tends to be, particularly the content aspect of it and SEO, is that it's evergreen traffic. Okay, always on, right? Now, outbound marketing, this is, what you'd consider the traditional push marketing, but it includes even the work that your inside sales teams and SDRs are doing with their direct outreach, right? They're cold calling, they've got, email marketing going, they've got, your events teams are going to trade shows, setting up demos, etc. All of that is outbound marketing. TV commercials, radio ads, all of that content is outbound marketing. Now, and it is intrusive. It tends to be like ads, for example. They tend to be quite expensive, and they tend to be ineffective on their own. Like if you're not doing that in combination with content marketing, for example, thought leadership, blogging, etc., outbound marketing tends not to be as effective on its own, but it is easier to measure, right? You're able to see the ROI right away, and you're able to sort of optimize your CPAs. And it can be personalized. The technology has evolved so that you can personalize ads, and all of the innovation that we've seen with things like programmatic, real-time bidding, and retargeting, etc., is all part of outbound marketing. Other things you need to be thinking about when you think about inbound versus outbound marketing is, what stage in the buyer's journey should you, sort of be deploying your inbound marketing versus your outbound. And for the kind, so if you think about this, what you're selling and the sales complexity, the deal size, the product type, is yours a product that requires customization, then you need to be doing more outbound marketing, right? You need to be out there doing demos, showing people how, evangelizing the category. That's going to be outbound marketing. If you are selling a product that's like average deal size is over $100,000, you need to be having outbound marketing in your marketing mix. So these are all the things that you need to be thinking about. But I like this visual because, good conversation starter, right? What should we have in our marketing mix? What is our data telling us? Are we doing integrated marketing? Are we over reliant on our inbound marketing? How should we be allocating our budget so we have a balanced marketing mix, etc., etc. The next slide is another factor that you should be thinking about. Your conversion rates, the tactics that have high conversion rates, and the tactics that have a faster close rate. I love these next two visuals because of the data and the insights that they imply. This was a study done by Implicit, plug-in into Salesforce, where they looked at hundreds of companies, B2B SaaS companies, looked at real data to see what were the tactics that were actually driving the closed sales. Where did those leads and those customers originate? And what were the channels and engines that essentially drove the fastest close rate? And what you see is customer and employee referrals. So having a referral marketing program is by far the best converting tactic and has the fastest close rate. This is the digitized word of mouth, right? And we should not be surprised. Word of mouth has, since time immemorial, right? It's still the number one marketing tactic. And referral program is essentially a digitized version of that. And then you see website. Second, right? Your website needs to be a sales engine. Have you acknowledged that the customer has changed? Customer knows and has much more information than they ever did before they land on your website. Is your website designed in such a way that it acknowledges that, or are you telling them the same stuff that they've already figured out from reading reviews of 10 of your customers? What is your website doing to close the sale? And then you see social is not too far behind. So are your sellers social? Is your entire organization socially savvy? Are you even doing social advertising? There's a ton of companies that still are saying, oh, you can't find the buyer on the Facebook. You can't find the buyer on TikTok. Really? Okay. Well, the data does not show that. And so, I prefer to let the data do the talking. But these visuals enable you to have these interesting conversations in your organization and enable you to at least get your leadership teams to consider some tactics. Like referral is one that not a lot of organizations put as number one on their list in terms of the marketing tactics they need to be deploying. but this is something that you should be bringing up if you are in charge of demand gen or acquisition in your organization. Here's another view of that data from Implicit. Shout out to Implicit. I think they got acquired by Salesforce. Ultimately, what they're showing here, conversion rates, fastest close rates, what are the tactics? The tactics in green are your best lead sources. So your website, social, and a customer referral program. And then things like paid search, partner marketing, and events. And the worst lead sources are things like email and buying lead list, which make complete sense. So the last visual I'm going to show you is, I like this because it's a very easy way you can explain to grandma or anybody else, what needs to be in your marketing arsenal, what is available to you from a digital marketing standpoint, and how you think about the tactics that need to be part of your marketing mix. And it also actually even helps you think about the whole customer journey, where it is that a customer might first become aware of your offering. Hey, New York. And where it is that your competitors are. So whether or not you decide to deploy in these channels, you can be sure that one or two or three of your competitors are in these channels, depending on how they've been funded and how savvy and whether they're doing integrated marketing. But so I think this visual you can use to have a lot of conversations on various topics, but essentially shows, from a web analytics standpoint, these are all the KPI, these are all the referring channels you should be tracking and measuring to see what traffic you get into. And then at the bottom half of this really shows the journey in terms of how you should be thinking of converting someone from an anonymous visitor into a lead, into a marketing qualified lead, into a sales qualified opportunity, and further into the sales cycle to hopefully become a closed sale. And what is the process in that, at each point in the sales cycle that you need to be optimizing. Each of these steps, from the point someone becomes a known lead to you, is a potential area that can be optimized. Because remember, if we go back to that very first slide, and one of the things we were trying to make sure people avoid is when you don't take into account the length of the sales cycle, you make a false calculus of your CAC. And so as you try to optimize your sales cycle, you're trying to reduce the sales cycle, you're trying to make the sales cycle friction free, right? So there's so many angles I could go with this visual. You could talk about your content strategy. How are you going to distribute your content through paid, through owned, right? You could talk about where it is that customers, what's the word of mouth, what is the referral, where should you be making sure you show up in the buyer's journey, where are you going to pay, where are you going to leverage your owned channels, what you're going to do in social, what channels you're going to focus in social. So many ways you can use this visual to initiate a conversation about your go-to-market strategy. Anyway, so that's the last slide. And these are some visuals that I use in various ways to talk about marketing, to educate people about various aspects of marketing, to remind myself about some foundational elements in marketing, to develop a go-to-market strategy. And I encourage you to hit the pause button look at them and see what sort of insights you might derive from them, or what sort of questions you might ask yourself about your business. I hope that was helpful. Hope that was useful. Good use of your time. Thank you for listening. And follow me on YouTube. Follow me on any of the social media channels. And please comment if you've got any feedback, or if you have any insights that you want to share with the rest of the viewers. Thanks for watching. What you waiting for? I see you standing.